The Vice President of the Republic of Indonesia arrived at the venue. The Vice Presidents of the Republic of Indonesia arrived at the venue. Please kindly stay on your feet. We would like to take a 1-minute moment of silence for the tragic loss of lives from the earthquake and tsunami incident that struck Lombok and Palu. A 1-minute moment of silence. Begin. Thank you. Please kindly be seated. His Excellency Muhammad Yusuf Kalla, Vice President of the Republic of Indonesia, His Excellency Jim Yong Kim, President of World Bank, Excellencies, Ministers, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen, Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh, and a very good morning to all of you. Om Swastiastu. We are delighted to welcome you to the high-level dialogue on disaster risk, financing, and insurance. We will begin with remarks by the Vice President of the Republic of Indonesia, His Excellency Muhammad Yusuf Kalla.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. In the name of God, the most benevolent and merciful.
Say that I will be speaking Indonesian. You have interpreters in your please. Yes.
Your Excellencies, President Jim Yong Kim, President of the World Bank, Excellencies, Ministers, distinguished delegates, distinguished guests. Today, I would like to extend my gratitude for your participation.
Pada dasarnya kita ingin membicarakan tentang solusi daripada disaster financing and insurance. Hal ini tentu bukan hanya hal yang penting di Indonesia, tapi merupakan suatu hal yang sangat penting untuk di bagian apapun di dunia ini. Karena bencana akan selalu datang tanpa diduga, dan tentu akan menyebabkan banyak kerusakan-kerusakan yang tentunya membebankan negara dan masyarakat di daerah tersebut. Karena itulah saya berterima kasih diselenggarakannya National Disaster Risk Financing and Insurance Strategy. Baru saja di Indonesia dalam waktu yang tidak lama terjadi bencana besar. Bencana baik di Bali, meletusnya Gunung Agung, gempa di Lombok, dan tentu diketahui semua gempa dan tsunami di Sulawesi Tengah. Memang risiko negara yang merupakan jalur ring of fire di Indonesia ini, sehingga dalam beberapa kesempatan juga Indonesia kadang-kadang disebut supermarket daripada bencana. Apakah itu gempa bumi, tsunami, longsor, banjir, atau kekeringan, itu merupakan suatu kejadian yang sering terjadi di banyak bagian di Indonesia ini. Karena itulah maka kita harus mempunyai perhatian baik sebelum bencana juga setelah bencana. Sama dengan di banyak negara, setelah bencana besar, maka di Indonesia juga dibuat lembaga BNPB atau Disaster Management Agency. Karena itu lembaga ini bertanggung jawab untuk baik untuk mitigasi juga pada saat bencana itu dan setelah bencana itu. Masalah yang kita hadapi khususnya pengalaman Indonesia, maka apabila bencana itu semua rehabilitasi, rekonstruksi dibiayai dengan APBN, maka negara itu tentu kesulitan untuk mempersiapkan segala-galanya. Bencana yang terbesar di Indonesia dalam sejarah modern Indonesia adalah tsunami di Aceh. Kita berterima kasih bahwa tanpa keterlibatan UN dan World Bank, maka bencana di Aceh itu tidak bisa diselesaikan dengan baik seperti sekarang ini. 2 minggu setelah bencana itu di Jakarta diadakan summit oleh UN dan World Bank, sehingga dapat terkumpul dana dari berbagai negara dan juga lembaga internasional, sehingga masalah Aceh, rehabilitasinya dan rekonstruksinya dapat kita selesaikan seperti ini. Dan rekonstruksi, rehabilitasi dan rekonstruksi Aceh dan juga Jawa Tengah seperti dulu itu mendapat penghargaan dari PBB sebagai suatu penyelesaian bencana salah satu yang terbaik daripada perkembangan itu. Karena itulah maka Indonesia mempunyai pengalaman yang panjang tentang bencana tersebut. Saya juga tentu mengalami proses daripada hal tersebut dengan Menteri PU dan Menteri Keuangan saat ini, juga Pak Darmin sebagai pejabat, bagaimana proses penyelesaian itu dengan baik apabila ada kerjasama internasional. Karena itulah pada hari ini kita akan membicarakan kerjasama internasional dari sisi bagaimana membiayai rehabilitasi dan rekonstruksi apabila terjadi bencana dimanapun terjadi di dunia ini, khususnya di Indonesia. Seperti saya katakan tadi, risiko bagaimana mengelola manajemen bencana dan bagaimana risiko fiskal dan bencana itu kita tentu bicarakan dan bagaimana solusinya. Salah satu solusi ialah tentu persiapan dan memberikan kesadaran dan melaksanakan apa yang dapat kita lakukan seperti asuransi daripada bencana. Memang tidak mudah tentu meyakinkan seluruh masyarakat, juga pemerintah. Selama ini aset-aset negara itu dibuat tanpa suatu perlindungan risiko fiskal akibat bencana. Kalau jembatan rusak, ya rusak, diganti lagi di bawah bencana. Kalau gedung rusak, gedung pemerintah rusak, ya sudah, ganti saja. Jadi semuanya menjadi beban APBN. Nah, tentu kita tidak ingin semua menjadi bahagian daripada beban APBN itu. Dan kita juga tentu tidak mau tergantung terus-menerus daripada bantuan daripada luar negeri. Namun juga bagaimana partisipasi masyarakat, bagaimana juga kita menjamin secara masa depan yang panjang, bagaimana aset negara dapat diasuransikan. Selama ini belum ada suatu aturan-aturan tentang bagaimana aset pemerintah, aset diasuransikan, dan bagaimana diyakinkan masyarakat untuk selalu melihat ke masa depan apabila ada bencana, sehingga masyarakat dapat memikirkan sejauh tersebut. Pengalaman terakhir di Sulawesi Tengah yang baru minggu lalu terjadi gempa dan tsunami ialah sekolah ada 2.000 yang hancur sama sekali, jembatan begitu banyak, dan karena itu, dan juga sekolah bangunan pemerintah begitu banyak. Di samping tentu rumah-rumah masyarakat yang mencapai 60.000 rumah yang harus direkonstruksi lagi. Ini semua membutuhkan suatu anggaran yang besar. Karena itulah, untuk meringankan beban anggaran tersebut, mari kita dalam kesempatan yang baik ini membicarakan solusi yang terbaik, sehingga negara pun mempunyai kesempatan untuk mengadakan suatu sistem yang baik seperti asuransi kepada aset-aset negara dan aset masyarakat. Memang selalu kita berbicara ini dalam situasi yang sulit. Kalau situasi sudah baik, kadang-kadang dilupakan. Nah, momen ini, pertemuan hari ini betul-betul momen yang tepat, karena baru satu minggu dan 1 bulan yang lalu terjadi bencana di Indonesia, yang kemudian kita membicarakan solusi jangka panjang daripada apa yang terjadi di sini. Karena itulah saya berterima kasih kepada Presiden World Bank dan juga seluruh hadirin yang hadir di sini, seluruh peserta dan juga para menteri yang hadir untuk membicarakan solusi masa depan daripada apabila ada bencana yang di Indonesia oleh Palang Merah Internasional disebut supermarket bencana. Bencana apa saja bisa timbul di negeri yang seperti kepulauan seperti ini, dan tentu dibutuhkan persiapan baik. Kan itulah saya mengucapkan terima kasih. Mudah-mudahan pertemuan ini mempunyai suatu pembicaraan jangka panjang, termasuk bagaimana mengadakan pooling fund, bagaimana mempromosikan baik rumah tangga dan asuransi infrastrukturnya, dan bagaimana upaya-upaya lain sehingga semuanya dapat berjalan sebaik-baiknya dan memberikan keamanan fiskal untuk kejadian-kejadian yang besar, dan kami tidak tergantung hanya kepada suatu kerjasama internasional, tapi merupakan satu kekuatan kita untuk mempertahankan kehidupan masyarakat untuk apabila terjadi bencana seperti ini. Itulah harapan saya. Saya ucapkan terima kasih. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Thank you, Your Excellency.
Terima kasih, Yang Mulia.
Indonesia is a country blessed with an abundance of natural resources and beauty. It straddles the equator, spanning from the Pacific to the Indian Ocean. But this is also the meeting point of 3 large tectonic plates: the Indo-Australian, the Eurasian, and the Pacific plate. This unique gift gives beauty, but also puts Indonesia at high risk to disasters. Almost all regions are exposed to 9 major hazards. This includes earthquakes, tsunamis, floods, volcanic eruptions, extreme weather, landslides, extreme wave, forest fires, and drought. The economic cost of disaster is also massive. From 2000 to 2016, The annual average cost is estimated at $1.4 billion US. This will likely only increase without a serious effort in mitigation, preparedness, and risk transfer. The annual budget is insufficient to deal with such large losses, which can come either from a major catastrophe or from multiple smaller disasters in a given fiscal year. This creates a financing gap. More importantly, financing for disaster prevention, response, and reconstruction should not only come from the government. This needs to be shared among the public sector, private sector, and communities. In response, the Ministry of Finance has developed a disaster risk financing strategy to provide large amount of money, well-planned, timely, well-targeted, transparent, and sustainable funding to protect public finances. The government priorities for disaster risk financing and insurance are protecting public assets both at the central government and regional level, speeding up livelihood recovery, protecting all households, particularly low-income people facing especially high disaster risk, promoting the role of the private sector, especially to further develop the domestic insurance market. After considering the situation and challenges, the Government of Indonesia formulates its disaster risk financing and insurance strategy as follows. Combine financial instruments to build an effective and efficient financing scheme. Retain the risk of high-frequency and low-severity shocks through the budget. Manage higher-impact disasters using contingent credit. Develop a pooling fund to strengthen the role of the budget. Transfer the risk from low-frequency and moderate to high-severity events to financial markets through insurance. Together, we can achieve the vision of Indonesia as a disaster-resilient nation that can pursue sustainable development.
We hope you enjoyed the video. Excellencies, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen, the Vice President of the Republic of Indonesia leaving the venue. Please kindly rise. Please kindly be seated. We will continue with our first panel. We kindly invite the moderator for the first panel, Ms. Sela Pazarbasioglu, Vice President, Equitable Growth, Finance and Institutions, World Bank Group. I will now hand over the floor to the moderator.
Thank you. Thank you also to Your Excellency Vice President Wapak Yusuf Kala. Good day. Selamat siang. I would like to take this opportunity to express my own sadness for the tragedy that unfolded in Sulawesi 2 weeks ago. Supporting resilience to natural disasters and other shocks is a key pillar of the World Bank Group's work. Increasing resilience requires stronger infrastructure, better drainage systems, and stronger buildings. It also requires preparedness, contingency planning, and an effective rapid response to reduce the impact of disasters. Concretely, this means 3 key elements: integrating risk considerations in budget planning and public investment management, financial planning and institutional capacity building to ensure that money is available when it's needed, where it's needed, and it's flows efficiently to those that need it the most in an efficient and transparent manner. And third, crowding in private capital through contingent public finance facilities and system-wide insurance systems and instruments. In the very fast digital age that we are in, it's also very important that we harness technology and digital tools to make sure that we make these systems more efficient and transparent. We are honored to support Indonesia's Ministry of Finance in their work on financial resilience. I would also like to acknowledge the support from our developing partners, including especially Switzerland, for their long-standing financial support and partnership in integrating disaster risks into better fiscal management. Today we are here to look forward and to recognize Indonesia's efforts to build disaster resilience. We have a very distinguished panel to share experiences and insights into how Indonesia can strengthen its financial resilience to disasters. Over the next 40 minutes, we will hear from them, and I would like to invite them to the platform, please. World Bank Group President Jim Yong Kim, Her Excellency Ibu Sri Mulyani, Minister of Finance, Indonesia, His Excellency Bapak Basuki Hadi Mulyono, Minister of Public Works and Public Housing of Indonesia, His Excellency Benjamin Diokno, Secretary of Budget and Management of the Philippines, and His Excellency Ono-san, Alternate Vice Minister of Finance of Japan. I would like to invite President Kim, please.
Thank you very much, and thank you all for being here. I too would like to start by offering our condolences to our brothers and sisters here in Indonesia. And I think the lessons are not as clear from this tragedy as they should be. As Vice President Bapak Kalla mentioned, Yusuf Kalla mentioned, Indonesia sits in a ring of fire. It is inherently vulnerable to risks. But the message that I want to give, and especially to the people of Indonesia, is that Indonesia is an extremely resilient country. In fact, despite the many, many shocks dating back, the ones that we remember most vividly are Aceh, despite the high risk and the many, many shocks, Indonesia has continued to do everything it can to be a leader in preparing for these kinds of shocks. And it's a very complicated and difficult business, especially when you're in this particular geographical zone. The many things that Indonesia has done, for example, in Aceh, Indonesia built the country's disaster risk management infrastructure from the ground up, enacting the legislation establishing what Vice President Kalla mentioned, the National Disaster Management Authority. After the Yogyakarta and Central Java earthquake and the Mount Merapi volcanic eruption, Indonesia became a leader in the Recompact approach, which puts communities at the center of housing reconstruction and resettlement. The houses built under this approach meet the seismic standards required by the government, but they do so in a way that allows communities to decide their own house type and use salvaged materials. The communities become co-creators and active stakeholders in rebuilding stronger than before. Recompact is also about 30% less expensive than conventional housing contracting, and working with people as co-creators leads to better building quality and greater owner satisfaction. So let me just be very clear. The lessons we have learned from Recompact are so powerful that we're taking them and trying to apply them in other countries all over the world. In this particular case, Indonesia is a leader in the world in how to respond to these disasters. There are all the foundations here to respond and recover quickly. And I have seen myself, I have visited some of these Recompact villages. I've seen how communities are now intricately involved in the response to disasters, and I know that in Sulawesi it will be exactly the same. When I visited these sites, there was a very different sense. The community knew that it had built back better. After the Haiti earthquake, that was the refrain over and over again, build back better. And it was at least partially it happened, but it took a very long time. My hope is that with the solidarity of the entire global community, that in Sulawesi we can build back better again and even more quickly. For Ibu Sri Mulyani and Bapak Basuki, we're here to support you in achieving the extremely ambitious goals that you set through National Disaster Risk Finance and the Insurance Strategy. And the way that we can help are several. Now, first, not only do we share your experiences with other countries, but we can share the experiences of 60 other countries with you. So over the recent decades, we've learned a great deal from our partnerships with countries about building comprehensive financial protection strategies to deal with disasters. This has also helped us to develop regional approaches. For example, under the mandate of the ASEAN +3 finance ministers, we're supporting the Southeast Asian Disaster Risk Insurance Facility, or CDRIF, in close collaboration with Japan. And Japan has consistently been a leader in bringing the world's attention to disaster risk management. The CDRIF program will develop financing instruments, including for the insurance of public assets, advanced knowledge exchanges, will leverage investments in the development of public goods, and mobilize technical assistance. The CDRIF initiative is also pushing the envelope with technology. For example, working with the European Space Agency to estimate the impact of floods in real time to help inform better decision making. Today we'll also hear from Japan and the Philippines, the two countries that will bring important lessons and experience to this particular group. Second, we can help by customizing instruments and building institutions and sustainable mechanisms to ensure that sufficient financing is always available very soon after disaster. As a financial institution, we can make available a range of disaster risk instruments. For instance, over $2.5 billion in contingent lines of credit that can provide rapid liquidity whenever a severe shock happens. We also have $3.9 billion in catastrophe and weather risk transactions that have leveraged risk capital in financial markets to create a financial buffer that complements government's own resources to respond quickly. Third, we'll also focus on bringing in the private sector to share risks with the capital markets. For example, last year, the Philippines transferred over $200 million of catastrophe risk to international markets in a new way to protect 25 provinces against losses from major typhoons. This was the first time a country has pooled and transferred subnational risk to international markets. And the countries of the Pacific Alliance earlier this year issued catastrophe bonds offering $1.36 billion in earthquake protection to Chile, Colombia, Mexico, and Peru. This was the world's largest sovereign risk insurance transaction. In partnership with Japan, the United Kingdom, and leading insurers, we're setting up an initiative to leverage disruptive technology to maximize financial risk management of public assets. Finally, we help by getting financial support quickly to the people in affected areas who need it most. This is a top priority for successful disaster recovery, which is why we're investing more and more in improving countries' financial infrastructure and social safety nets so they can react quickly to shocks. Providing rapid financial assistance to households is a priority for us to safeguard human capital development. Ensuring children stay in school after a disaster is critical to make sure that they don't fall behind. Investing in resilience pays off, first by saving lives and avoiding destruction and losses, but also by improving the quality of development. Disaster losses fluctuate from year to year, but the trend is a clear and rapid increase. Our modeling work shows that disasters now cause an average of around $382 billion in economic losses globally per year. But economic losses don't show the full extent of the impact of disasters, especially on the poorest and most vulnerable, who face dire situations when disasters strike. When we take into account the disproportionate impact of disasters on poor people, the real price tag of natural disasters grows to $555 billion per year, 45% more than the pure financial losses. To cope with and recover from disasters, countries need risk management instruments, financial inclusion, disaster risk and health insurance, social protection for households, and contingent finance and reserve funds. We estimate that the benefits from being better prepared to respond to disasters is around $173 billion per year. Over the coming weeks, we'll learn more about Indonesia's needs for recovery and reconstruction. Under the government's leadership, we're prepared to respond to Indonesia's needs. During this week's meetings, the people of Sulawesi and Lombok and all Indonesians will be foremost in all of our minds. I hope everyone will think about how we stay ambitious and focused on supporting Indonesia's resilience in both the short and the long run. It's easy to lose sight of the big picture when dealing with these kinds of tragic disasters. Indonesia's ambitions and new risk financing strategy are a critical part of the big picture of building comprehensive disaster resilience. And let me just say, I want to emphasize again, this was an extremely tragic and horrific situation in Sulawesi. But I want especially everyone in Indonesia to know that your leaders have been at the forefront of preparing. It's just that in any country, when you see a disaster like this, you need help. And that's why I'm here. That's why the Secretary General of the United Nations is here. What we're putting together is what we would do for any country in the world, a multilateral global response of solidarity, thinking only about the people who are suffering in Sulawesi and before in Lombok. We're here to stand with you. We admire all the things that you've already done here in Indonesia, and we're grateful for the things that you've done that have been so forward-looking that we're now using them to help other countries get better in their ability to respond. We stand with you, we will continue to stand with you, and we thank you for your leadership. Thank you.
Thank you, President Kim. I would like to invite Minister Sri Mulyani, please.
Thank you very much, President Kim, all my colleagues from the World Bank Group, all participants of this IMF World Bank annual meeting. Welcome to Bali, and I really appreciate the effort that we make between Ministry of Finance and World Bank Group, as well as in cooperation and support by the Swiss Confederation, to actually help hold this meeting, which is very, very timely. Even when we plan to have this event, we didn't plan for the earthquake in Lombok as well as Palu. But this is becoming so timely and so important for us. And that's why I really appreciate Jim, as well as all colleagues in the World Bank Group, to elevate this event to become more important, more visible. In the past couple of weeks, I was constantly receiving questions from the media about what is the plan to reconstruct, do we have enough money to support for the people in Lombok, and then now we hit with Palu, do we still have money in the budget for the emergency, are we planning and preparing for the rehabilitation and reconstruction? So a lot and very high curiosity and question from the media. And that's why when I look at the budget of Indonesia, I think this is going to be one of the most valuable lessons that we really need to step up our preparation and ability to deal with disasters. So we, in this case, has developing the disaster risk and financing and insurance with the 4 steps that is in our strategy on how we can identify the current government financing scheme to the disasters. And second one, we identify the problem, including assessing disaster and the fiscal risk, because we have the disaster profile as already presented earlier. It can be in many different forms: volcano, landslide, tsunami, earthquake. These are all, in terms of frequency, location, and the severity is different. So we need to identify the disaster as well as disaster risk, as well as what is the consequence from the fiscal side. And then within this strategy, we need to set a priority and develop the strategy. So we want to make the disaster not as a waste event, but an event that will make us learn more and do better in responding it. In identifying the current government financing, in Indonesia, when disaster occur, most of the economic losses will be borne by government and the society. Definitely people not only losing the loved one, but also house as well as asset, and even for many small medium enterprises and corporations, they also suffer the loss and they born without any insurance. Indonesia, in terms of the insurance penetration, is still very, very shallow and thin, and that's why this is not yet in the DNA of many Indonesian people. The current financing scheme for disaster-related expenditure is very much heavily depend on the budget allocation. Sometimes we need even have to reallocate from the less priority into this more emergency and urgency. I'm here with my DJ budget, who knows very well that when there is quite a lot of emergency coming, we really have to sometimes reallocate the budget. And under current approach in our budgeting, the central government and local government cover their financing through the state as well as sub-national budget. And local government, in terms of their fiscal capacity, is heavily depend on national government transfer. So there is no really resiliency from both local government in all level, district, provincial, and then everything is going to be then become the burden of the national budget. And the focus of the response after the disaster hit is first on the emergency step, usually more on the humanitarian and supporting the life of the people threatened by this disaster. And then we declare the recovery and reconstruction. But never in this three-step, emergency, recovery, and reconstruction, we actually discuss about how the financing for risk transfer, how the risk can be transferred, and what is going to be the consequence on the financing. Several government risk transfer programs related to disasters, such as insurance for farmer or fishermen, is still very scattered, and this is still in a very early piloting project. And they are not designed as a one comprehensive within what we call it a framework for the disaster risk management and reduction. We also have a program for the food security, and some extent we are providing support for the low-income household, but they are not really integrated within the context of creating a resilience and an insurance for the population to be covered from this kind of risk. Indonesia, as mentioned by Vice President as well as the presentation earlier, since 2004 until 2013, we frequently hit by many different disasters. From the total loss from those disasters from 2004 to 2013, the total amount of losses is 126.7 trillion, or around 8.4 billion. The average losses, economic losses, is 22.8 trillion, or around 1.5 billion. While in this case, if you look at the biggest in the still recent history, Aceh tsunami, the losses is up to 51.4 trillion. And this is really big budget. At the time that we have Aceh, happened to be at that time I was Minister of Planning and then moved to become Finance Minister. This has become one of the biggest challenges if you consider and compare with the budget for the local government, which is not only totally collapsed, almost 1/3 of their staff is actually wiped to this tsunami, so they totally paralyzed. So local government is totally paralyzed, not only in terms of financing, but also in terms of their capacity to lead and to build and rebuild again. So national government have to actually step up and provide support. And that make the burden is becoming so obvious. And within the political process, we really need to sometimes, the earthquake or anything, there is no schedule. We never know whether this is going to happen weekend, in the month of January or December. It can happen anytime. So in the past 12 years, the mechanism within our budget is putting the contingent fund, which is only amounted around 4 trillion. If you compare with the annual damage of around 22.8 trillion, this is only a very small portion of what is needed. And this is mostly also for emergency. So basically our financing gap and even the design of how we are going to finance is severely inadequate. It's still very basic. We don't have any what you call mechanism and sophistication to really deal with that. When I returned back to Indonesia, I actually discussed with my team in the Ministry of Finance, how could we actually start designing a disaster risk management and financing. So we actually in the past 18 months intensify our discussion with the World Bank and as well as many of the development partners, as well as with the industry, both nationally as well as globally. And then we have this kind of disaster. So it seems like this is something that we really need to work even faster. With the contingent fund which is inadequate, that will definitely hamper the ability of government to respond to this disaster, either in an emergency, recovery, and then rebuilding. If you look at the direct economic loss from one single earthquake, that can cause damage in school, hospital, government building, the level of damage on the average is 30 to 40%. For these two locations, Lombok as well as Palu, I've already received a report from my team that all Minister of Finance building, because we have branching for tax, custom, treasury, as well as Director General for the asset management. These all our vertical building, vertical offices, they also suffer loss. Some of them is actually still, the building is still looks like okay, but when we ask Minister of Public Work to assess, they are no longer feasible and safe for us to use. Meaning that we have to rebuild it, and very quickly, because we cannot wait, we are not going to do with the taxation or treasury until we have a new building. So it's really a management which is very complicated. So for us, the challenge now, how we can create and define a fiscal management that will addressing and understanding the risk, and how we can design the financing according to that profile and the level of risk. Our policy objective is how we can protect the people and then also public finance in a sustainable and efficient risk financing way, and how we can meet disaster-related expenditure in a plan and timely, so that the losses in terms of the life as well as economic and social can be really minimized. How we can develop a well-targeted and transparent assistance following any disaster and shock. So priority that we outlined today is to protect public asset management, both central and subnational government. For 2019, we've already discussed with the Parliament, and I initiated to start insuring many government building, and we've already discussed with the insurance industry domestically. This is for the 2019 fiscal year. But in terms of protecting all households and people affected by disaster, especially low-income country, We still rely on the social safety net, but there is no really a program or design that can effectively support them. Usually president will decide after visiting, for example, in Lombok, after a couple of days, he flew to the Lombok and see, and then decided, okay, we are going to support for the household, severely damaged this much, medium damage this much, and low damage this much. But there is no really what we call it a targeted, tested system. And how we can restore the livelihood of people which is affected by disaster in a quick and effective way is also another, usually scatter program. And then strengthening the role of private sector in disaster risk management is very, very minimum or not, it's just an afterthought. So for us, how we are going to improve our disaster risk financing insurance is how we are going to get the timely and adequate funding in order for us to be able to support all necessary institutions, which is in the first hour or first day, they are there to do the emergency, and then they start doing recovery and rebuilding. How we can actually layering risk so that it is not going to be single financial instrument that will cover all the risk, which is impossible. So we are going to design which risk should be covered by local government, which risk should be covered by national government, which risk should be covered by private sector or market mechanism, and which risks which can be covered by the community. And then how we can design an effective disbursement disaster-related fund. As of now, BNPB, that is the National Agency for the Disaster Risk Management, usually have what we call it an on-call funding, and then they will rapidly coordinate across ministries and then asking for money in every week that they need those money. And that's why many of the media continue ask, Ibu, do you still have money? And it is really like an interesting question. And for the Minister of Finance, you are asked by media almost every doorstep, you still have money, seems like very depressing. But it's not supposed to be like that. And that is exactly, I feel that we need to design better so that media doesn't have to ask those kind of questions. It creates more pressure for me unnecessarily and not helping at all. And then, of course, we need to have an accurate data and information. I don't mind to be asked, it's just to clarify to our colleague media, to be asked like that. And I actually answered the question, what is the mechanism in the budget? But for them, the easiest question is actually, do you still have money for this? And that's why it's something that we need to elevate our communication strategy and how we are going to be able to continue communicating how the government responds in a more credible and effective way. So for us now, and I'm actually happy to be here in front of many my international colleagues from World Bank Group, from many other institutions. I know Sonny here from Philippines, my friends, Minister of Finance. And in the ASEAN Finance Minister, we discussed about disaster risk management also. Philippines provide with a very good, with the World Bank support on how you cover the risk from typhoon frequency. I also see from the report that there is in Latin America, Mexico, Chile, Peru, as well as Colombia. They together, the four of them, is designing the disaster rates financing and insurance that is covered from 2018 to 2022. I really want to learn from that. I also know that Morocco have an insurance for housing and small medium enterprises. Because when I visited the affected area, we definitely can see very visible the damage in the housing, and they need to be rebuilt permanently, not just temporarily, as well as how we can start jump-starting the economic activity. That in itself will help people to recover. And I was thinking that if we have an insurance for the housing as well as the small medium enterprises, this is going to be an effective way to help many affected areas. I also see that Philippines is having one pooling risk for their local government. I want to learn because Indonesia is a huge country. We have 34 provincial area, more than 500 kabupaten and district. They have a different risk profile. I'm thinking, and we'll start in 2019, of having a pooling risk and pooling fund that will cover. But I really don't know how. I'm not shy saying that I don't know. I want to know how we can structure the risk, how we can design. Money, I can reserve it now, but it will be good. And then how the World Bank can help of reinsuring to the international and having a lower and acceptable level of price that we should pay. I think this is going to be very good for us. It will improving more our ability to respond. And that's why President Kim, with your presence and your help, I'm actually now asking you and your leadership and asking all your team here to help me to do what I've already mentioned earlier. Can I learn about housing and small medium insurance like in Morocco? Can you help me, the one that you have in insuring like Colombo, Peru, Mexico, and Chile? What kind of pooling risks and mechanism? Can I learn from my colleague Sonny, in this case in Philippines, what you did there? What is the value added? How can we do that better, of course, so that Sonny will see me that I learn fast and better, so then Philippines can learn again from us. We always learn each other very quickly. And of course, in this case, we will be able to, of course, managing the fiscal rates in which we are going to be able to support the people, especially the people affected, but at the same time preserving the fiscal sustainability. So these are all the needs that we have, and I'm actually glad to share it with you all, because this is the place in which we inviting you in the IMF World Bank annual meeting, and the UN Secretary General is also invited in this meeting for tomorrow leaders meeting. These are all the institutions which operate globally. You know how many practices happen in many different parts of the world for a different kind of issue and risk. We want to learn effectively and efficiently, and I know that I can rely on you. Thank you so much.
Thank you. And we will make sure to share all those experiences and be supportive to you. I would like to ask Minister Basuki Hadimulyano, please.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Very good morning, honorable speakers, distinguished guests. First of all, allow me to speak here, not only as a Minister of Public Works and Housing, but also I'm a member of the HELP, high-level experts and leaders panel to the Secretary General of UN on water and disasters. As was mentioned earlier by the Vice President, in the last 2 months, several strong earthquakes have struck Indonesia. First, an 8 Richter scale earthquake hit already West Nusa Tenggara on August the 5th, and recently the 7.4 Richter scale earthquake hit Central Sulawesi on September 28, 2018. Those destructive earthquakes caused heavy damages. In Palu and Donggala, Central Sulawesi, the earthquake is followed by a wall of water funneled down a bay to the sea level town with highly populated areas and liquefaction phenomenon, which is quite rare. This liquefaction already damaged two or three area with fatality, the most fatality happened here. While in Lombok and Sumbawa, West Nusa Tenggara, the earthquakes predominantly struck the rural areas in a fast impacted areas covering 7 districts. So it is really different between those two area hit by the earthquakes. Since then, the Government of Indonesia has undertaken intensive emergency responses that focus on victims' evacuation, water supply and sanitation provision, city clearance from building debris, and betterment of road condition after the catastrophic events. We set the target that within 2 weeks' time, we will conduct the emergency phase successfully and begin the rehabilitation and reconstruction phases immediately in order to restore local economic activities in place. HELP have outlined the principles on investment and financing, especially for water related to disaster risk reduction. So we really will focus on the risk reduction financing. In this instance, we have witnessed globally today, number of victims and economic losses caused by disasters are significantly increasing. The direct damages of disasters alone over the past 10 years are estimated to about $1.4 trillion. Water-related disasters account for almost 90% of the world's top 1,000 disasters. The importance of increasing investment and financing for disaster risk reduction is now widely recognized in international agreements, such as the Sendai Framework for Disaster Risk Reduction. However, about 90% of the international assistance has been directed for conducting emergency responses and reconstruction or rehabilitation, while the amount disbursed for disaster prevention and preparedness has been limited to only 10%. I believe that it is time now for us to shift our prime importance to focus more on disaster risk reduction, as Ibu Sri Mulyani just said before, with increased level of financing of disaster preparedness higher from 10%. On the other hand, we need to decrease the current 90% level of financing for emergency response to significant lower need level. Countermeasures being implemented in advance to mitigate disaster should not consider a cost, but instead as an investment for the future socioeconomic development. Build back better means we are not only just to rebuild what has been destroyed, like in this map. The Palu is just around here. It is just exactly in the fault, the big fault here. So we have to make a new master plan to build a new Palu, not just to rebuild what has been destroyed by the earthquake. This is what I mean with the build back better. So this build back better approach should be incorporated into the recovery and reconstruction process so as to improve the resilience of communities and prevent recurrent damages from similar disasters. The government thereby must prepare the legal, financial, and administrative frameworks for disaster risk reduction. The central government should prepare support and financial assistance system for the local governments in great necessity to mitigate a large-scale disaster impact that exceeds local capacities to rebound. A wide international cooperation in disaster risk reduction should be strengthened under the international framework, since catastrophic event damages in one country could potentially affect also the entire region. Therefore, I reiterate my call that international community should focus more on preventive measures of recovery and reconstruction programs. The science and technology should also be strengthened to support sound investment decisions. Cooperation and alliances among science communities should be enhanced in order to seek appropriate and applicable answer to disaster risk reduction challenges. We need to work in collaborative ways consistently to implement the framework as well as to achieve SDGs goals and HELP's recommendation. This is not by any means a simple task. I will be very supportive to strategic effort undertaken to enhance disasters management. I strongly believe that with those partnership and cooperative between countries and related institutions, we can readily formulate strategic action recommendation that can be effectively implemented to achieve significant disaster risk reduction in order to create safer society, better culture, and brighter future for all. So there are two messages here, that the risk reduction financing should be given more attention and priorities. And the second, disaster risk reduction is not on a cost, but investment for the better future. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Minister. I'd like to give the floor now to Secretary Diokno to share the experience of Philippines, please.
Good morning, everyone. First, I would like to convey my deepest sympathies to our Indonesian brothers and sisters for the recent natural disaster to hit their beautiful country. Second, I'd like to thank the Indonesian government and the World Bank for giving me this opportunity to share with you the Philippines' experience in disaster, risk financing, and insurance. As you know, the Philippines also has its share of natural disasters. Historically, the Philippines ranked 5th most affected in the period 1997 to 2016 in terms of long-term climate risk index. It also ranked 16th in the list of countries most affected by extreme weather events in 2016. The government of the Philippines has identified 3 overarching goals in managing the financial effects of natural disasters. Along these goals are strategic priorities at the national, local, and individual levels to improve the financing of post-disaster emergency response, recovery, and reconstruction needs. Now, to improve the financial management of disasters, it is important to understand the timing of post-disaster funding needs and the longer-term cost of differential sources of financing. Access to immediate liquidity is crucial to support relief and early recovery operations, while the financing of post-disaster reconstruction usually starts several months later, giving the government more time to mobilize the required resources. The government of the Philippines recommends combining different risk financing instruments to protect against events of different frequency and severity. Such risk layering aims to minimize the cost of financing and optimize the timing of financing. It ensures that cheaper sources of money are used first, with the most expensive instruments used only in exceptional circumstances. We have 2 disaster-related programs. First, the parametric insurance program, and second, the catastrophic deferred drawdown options. Parametric insurance, unlike traditional indemnity insurance, does not need long and tedious on-site assessment to determine actual loss and corresponding claims. In this case, payout triggers are modeled losses generated using the Philippine catastrophe risk model, and payouts are considered cash infusion, not restrictions on use. Since the national government agencies involved in disaster risk management and local government units are the first responders, the parametric insurance policy is structured to have two main index categories: aggregate or whole of covered area and province specific. Payouts against aggregate indices are due to the national government agencies, while those against province-specific indices are due to local governments. Based on the risk profile of the covered area, only typhoon is applied on the province-specific indices, while applying both perils on the aggregate index to the still account for earthquake events. The diagram on the screen shows the mechanics of the parametric insurance program of the Philippine government. Our second major program with the World Bank is what is called the catastrophe deferred drawdown option. This option allows immediate liquidity in the aftermath of a disaster. As a standby loan facility, the CAT DDO can be availed in the form of budgetary support after the declaration of a state of calamity, and the diagram on the screen shows the mechanics of this special drawdown feature. The recent typhoon that struck the Philippines triggered the application and withdrawal under the loan with the declaration of the President of the state of calamity in the affected areas. Around $497 million was withdrawn from the World Bank as budgetary support. Now let's move on to the budgetary instruments available for the disaster risk management and response. First, we have what we call the National Disaster Risk Reduction Management Fund, or NDREAM. This is a special purpose fund for aid, relief, and rehabilitation services to communities, areas affected by man-made and natural calamities, and repair and reconstruction of permanent structures, including other capital expenditures for disaster operation and rehabilitation activities. Now, the NDREAM Fund is supplemented by the Quick Response Fund, which is a standby fund lodged under implementing agency's budget to be utilized in providing goods and services in order that the situation and living conditions of people living in communities affected by natural or human-induced calamities, epidemics, crises, and catastrophes, which occurred in the last quarter of the immediate preceding year and those occurring during the current year, may be normalized as quickly as possible. Now, there's Republic Act 10121, or the Philippine Disaster Risk Reduction and Management Act of 2010, granted local governments greater flexibility towards disaster mitigation, preparation and response, rehabilitation and recovery. Specifically, the law provides that a local disaster and risk management fund amounting to not less than 5% of the estimated revenue from all sources shall be set aside to support disaster risk management activities. The law mandates that 30% of the said fund shall be in the nature of a quick response fund and the 70% allocation for disaster prevention and mitigation, preparedness, response, rehabilitation, and recovery. Under the program convergence budgeting, several government agencies work as one to meet common objectives instead of competing for the budgets. It reinforces government's push for a more prudent and targeting spending by fostering collaboration among agencies in planning, budgeting, and implementing priority programs and projects. Now, the climate change adaptation and mitigation disaster risk reduction cabinet cluster, a long name, consists of a number of agencies that have been institutionally clustered to provide a programmatic response to climate change and disaster-related issues. They developed a nationwide investment program on climate change, what we call the Risk Resiliency Program. Through the Risk Resiliency Program convergence budgeting, the RRP has allowed the government to improve the targeting of climate investments. And over the years, we can see that the expenditure for Risk Resiliency Program is increasing. This reflects our government's growing commitment to harmonize our efforts on climate change adaptation and mitigation and disaster risk reduction. The allocation tripled from a mere 48.6 billion in 2014 to 157 billion in 2018. Now, finally, from a small share of the budget, you will see an increasing trend of the Risk Resiliency Program share from a mere 2.6% in 2014. Each share has increased to 4.2% in 2018. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Mr. Onasan, please, if you could tell us about the Japanese experience.
Thank you, Chair. First of all, I'd like to offer deepest condolences to those who lost loved ones and express our heartfelt sympathies to all the affected people. Japan, which is earthquake and tsunami-prone country as well, wish to express our solidarity with Indonesia. So how do we prepare? What are the most effective ways? Before answering then, I would like to show you our Japan's experience on the earthquake that struck Hokkaido last month. Many of you know Hokkaido very well. It is a northern island of Japan, very attractive sightseeing spot. That earthquake's magnitude was 6.7. It is relatively strong, but we should say it's well within our expectation. So naturally, we should have been prepared very well, but was not actually the case. 40 people were killed by landslides, and 2-day-long blackout caused $1 billion in economic losses. Blackout, electric companies are usually equipped with adjustment mechanism to always keep in balance between supply and the demand of electricity. Actually, Hokkaido Electric Company has such a balancing mechanism. However, actually, what happened last month was as much as 50% reduction, 50% sudden reduction in output. Hokkaido Electric Company could not deal with such a huge imbalances and failed in adjusting it, which occurred severely damaged fired power plants. Now the Accidental Investigation Committee is probing the causes. So this experience shows us how difficult it is to fully prepare for natural disasters. Unexpected events will continue to happen. Even countries are proud of cutting edge of disaster preparedness, like Japan, should continue their efforts of learning. Here, we strongly understand the necessity of sharing lessons learned, cooperating internationally. Today, I'd like to show you our 3 approaches to prepare for natural disasters. 3 aspects of preparedness. The first is a physical aspect of preparedness, that is infrastructure, strong enough to properly withstand natural disasters. Let me raise an example. You may recall that Hurricane Irma hit Caribbean islands last year. Among others, in the island of Barbuda, almost all the houses and infrastructures are completely destroyed. However, do you know, certain facilities in that island were not damaged at all. There were a pier and a building for fish processing. That building was so tough that people rushed to it for shelter, and those facilities also functioned as a key infrastructure for recovery. They were constructed with support of Japan's aid program. Many of you know that Japan is advocating quality infrastructure. One of the merit is low life cycle costs. But however, the merits of a quality infrastructure go beyond that. Higher resilience to natural disasters saves lives of people and advances restoration works. So the important thing is that infrastructure work properly. Quality is not luxury. Quality means to just operate properly. In this regard, we are considering taking up quality infrastructure as agenda of the coming G20 meeting next year. We believe we need to upgrade the concept of quality infrastructure investment, which was defined in the 2016 G20 in Hangzhou, China. Specifically, we may highlight governance and openness as well as resilience. We also believe that through our policy efforts, we need to implement such concept in real projects. The second aspect of preparedness is finance. How can we manage to raise funds for recovery or restoration works? How can we do that without putting pressure to government finances? The Japanese government, together with private insurance companies, has been providing seismic risk insurance services to Japanese people for more than 50 years. These services cover not only earthquakes, but also tsunamis and eruptions. They have effectively protected residential buildings against these disasters. The important thing is that we have designed it not to put pressure to Japanese national finances. Let me give you some numbers. Japan predicts that the earthquake with magnitude 7+ will hit metropolitan Tokyo area in 30 years with the probability of 70%. So it's probable. So if it occurs, damage to residential buildings, only residential buildings, are estimated to be $100 billion, which equals 10% of our annual budget. The Japanese government needs to pay that amount for recovery, but not want bad impacts on national finances. So the key is the risk pool. Japan has established and managed a domestic risk pool. Insurance premium have been and will be accumulated in this risk pool. $100 billion for recovery will come from this risk pool, not from our national finances. If domestic risk pool works effectively, more effectively must international risk pool work. You know that regarding the risk pool, the broader risks are gathered, the better performance is expected. This is why Japan is attaching very high priority to promoting international cooperation on disaster risk insurance. This is the third aspect of preparedness, international cooperation. Specifically, our Ministry of Finance has taken a leadership in establishing Caribbean catastrophe risk insurance facility. After the successful experience in this facility, our ministry, together with Germany, the United States, and the United Kingdom, has created disaster risk finance mechanism for Pacific Islands, which is called PICRAFI, Pacific Catastrophe Risk Assessment and Financing Initiative. We also have launched a similar project in the ASEAN region. It is called CDRIF, a Southeast Asia Disaster Risk Insurance Facility. At their meeting in this May, ASEAN Plus 3 finance ministers and central bank governors agreed to establish CDRIF. They are preparing to start its operation next year. With Japan's experience international cooperation in mind, we commend Indonesia for launching the national disaster risk finance and insurance strategy of its own. We also prepare to support, we are prepared to support Indonesia's effort through a new technical assistance program of CDRIF in collaboration with the World Bank. We also welcome Indonesia's intent to participate in the CDRIF. We look forward to other countries follow Indonesia. Taking this opportunity, I would like to call other countries to participate in supporting this initiative. We are considering to take up disaster risk insurance financing and insurance next year under our G20 presidency, showcasing successful frameworks, both domestic and regional, would encourage us to advance disaster risk insurance around the world. I've talked about the effective ways to prepare for natural disasters. To summarize, let infrastructure work properly. Second, let insurance work effectively. And lastly, but not least, this is today's main theme. Let's advance international cooperation. Thank you for your kind attention.
Thank you, Ono-san. So I would really like to thank the panel for the great sharing of experiences of Indonesia as well as Japan and Philippines. And we promise that we will continue to drive this momentum and develop the necessary technology and innovative instruments for prevention, resilience, and recovery. Thank you.